there are things you can take out of this and probably apply to your family. And it's certainly not about Urkel or the 90s sitcom that we stole this from. But it's about how the church is supposed to be a family, and how that was always kind of God's plan, and that God wanted us to figure that out. And really the whole series, working together, this is my fourth sermon in the series. As we've worked through the series, I've tried to hit different aspects of that, and trying to build towards a point. And then I've looked back at it. I think I've hit most of what I wanted to hit on, but there's still some other things that I really wanted to say in this that I think are kind of important. And when I started trying to weigh out how much I needed to get done here, my head was all over the place. I have a problem with that anyway, that ADHD kind of brains on 75 things at one time, and I have a hard time focusing in. And so I wrote down kind of the target, before I got up. This is where I'm wanting to head in this sermon. And it was this idea that the church is a glorious movement of transformed lives. When I get done, like the last thing I want to say, the last thing I want people to take out of here is that the church is a glorious movement of transformed lives. And when I was trying to think about how to get to that, I ran into some trouble trying to figure that out. We've been doing a thing in the last few weeks, really since we started handing out these bulletins again, where we put down some questions ahead of time and an action step ahead of time, and I'm trying to head towards that. And then I had this other statement here. I'm wanting to head towards that the whole sermon. Josh told me this last week. He said, I think your sermons I think you've hit a different gear, because I can tell you're really trying so hard to get to that deal, which actually put this weird pressure on me to try to do it again. And again, the ADHD. So all week long, like a target on the wall, I had that. And I kept thinking of new scriptures I needed to add in there and try to weave those into what I wanted to say to get to the very end. And so kind of as a result, I feel like this sermon is a little thicker, a little more dense than normal sermons. So I wanted to warn you about that ahead of time. How many of you were hoping for a little more thick, dense sermon? Okay, for you guys, this is going to rock. But for the rest of you, same time though, we won't be here any longer, hopefully, than normal. Just trying to get a lot of things covered at the same part. All right, first, just so we can kind of be on the same page, when Jesus talks about the church, when he talks about what he wants the church to be, he says this: I'm going to build the church. So it's all founded on him. It's all founded on his ideas. It's all founded on his spirit. It's all founded on his direction. I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades, he says, won't overcome it. And that word Hades can be translated a couple different ways. Hades is pretty close to the original language. That's why the NIV chooses it here. But in how we talk today, we don't usually use the word Hades very often. And so it could be translated gates of hell, and that might be what he has in mind. Not only not so much eternity as far as like this is where the bad people are, not really thinking that way, as much as the devil and all his minions and all the spiritual forces of darkness. And if he means it that way, gates of hell, then what he's saying here is, I'm going to build my church, and Satan will he won't be able to stop it. He won't be able to stop it. The devil will attack it, and he won't be able to stop it. In fact, like I said before the last song there, the gates of hell are more of a defensive weapon. So it's not like he's really even playing offense against the church. He's just trying to hold his ground. But he won't be able to do that either, and that could be what he means. Hades also, in our more contemporary, how we would talk, could be, and some Bibles choose the word death here. The gates of death won't be able to overcome it. And that might be what he means there too, and that could have the implication that the devil won't be able to kill it. He won't be able to stop it. I mean, that death won't win. It won't die. Jesus says, I'm going to build my church and it won't die. That would be the implication there. And if it's that's his implication, well, actually either way on the implication there, he's making a prediction that's a prophecy almost, that his church won't stop. That once it starts, it's not going to stop. And even in the last 100, 150 years, we've seen some pretty industrial attempts to try to stop the church. Whole governments rise up that made Christianity illegal and tried to eliminate it. And over and over and over again, we see the church endure. That the harder it's squeezed, the harder it's attacked, the harder that it's punished, it just becomes more and more evergreen. And Jesus predicted that. He said, this is what you can look forward to. And then that word church there at the beginning, the word that Jesus used could be, church is kind of a late word. It's not a word that it wasn't really a word that he would have used. It's more of a community. Ecclesia is the Greek word. It's more of a community or a movement, right? It's not really, the problem with the word church is that in modern English, church often refers to this building. I'm going to go to church, you might say to someone else, and they'll know what you mean if you say that. You're going to that building. Yeah, I'm going to go to church. And when I go to church, that's where church will be. And that was really never how Christ presented his kingdom. Once when he was getting grilled by the Pharisees and when the kingdom of God would come, he said the kingdom of God doesn't come like it's not here, but count a few more days later, it'll be here in a few days. Like wait till Sunday and the church will be there. It's not like that. And no one's going to be able to say, look here or there it is, because the church is in you. It's amongst you. I mean, God's kingdom. It's here now, and it's here all the time. You don't have to wait for it or go there. It's just there. That's how Jesus kind of thought of it. And so when he says, I'll build my church, it's kind of complicated how it got to be that, and that very brief history of the church. When the church became legal and even some Caesars were becoming Christian, it became popular to be Christian. And it became an avenue to have some power. Now, what Mike said during communion, this idea came that you could only really be a solid Christian if you were a pro-Christian, right? If you were a bishop or a priest or a preacher, that those were the guys who were the most important. And the regular Christians really didn't have much to do with anything. And you went to a church, and you went to a special place, a building. The church, Kyrios Doma, Kyrios in German is Karch, and that's where we get church from. That all comes through the Germanic, and church became a word that came on later. It was more of an institution. But I don't think that was really what Jesus had in mind. I think he always saw it more as a dynamic thing, like a river or a storm, a fast-moving animal or a fast-moving car. I mean, it had motion to it. It was all the time spreading around, a cloud, that just kind of fogs over everything. In his mind, those were all kinds of the pictures of church that he had in mind. And he'd build it, and it would never stop. Jesus says, I'm going to start this thing, and it won't ever go away. And that's who we're supposed to be. Jesus, on the last night of his life before the cross, prayed about this. And that's our passage today we're going to look at in John 17. The last night he was alive, he spent some time praying about it. And in John 17, it's a really long prayer. It's several verses, 30 or 40 verses there of Jesus praying. It's the longest prayer we have from Jesus. And it really differs from how Matthew and Mark and Luke describe his last prayer. His last prayer they describe as, Father, take this cup from me, and he's sweating drops of blood, and he's just so nervous. Not my will, but yours be done. But this prayer is a little more long, and it's a lot more confident, and it's a lot more forward-looking, and not just looking at his own personal stuff he's dealing with, but the stuff that's coming ahead. And so I don't know that this prayer was made at Gethsemane. I think it's probably made on the way. It's between the Last Supper and the Garden of Gethsemane where he gets arrested. And as he's making his way there, some guys think they're going past the temple, or they're going past the walls of Jerusalem where they can see the temple up over it. And while he's there and they can see the priests, what the priests are doing, and they can see all that, Jesus prays this kind of priestly prayer. And he asks God to be in the middle of everything. And this is the gist of it, the part I want to talk about. In verse 20, he says, my prayer is not just for the 12 disciples, not just for the guys who have been with me for the last 3 years. He says, I also pray for those who will believe in me through their message. So Jesus, on the way to Gethsemane, really on the way to the cross, he stops to pray not only for his disciples, that's what he did before verse 20, but he also prays for you. Jesus, on his way to the cross, stops to pray for you. for the ones who will believe because of what the disciples say. I don't know that some preachers will talk about how Jesus on the cross saw you on the cross. I'm not sure that, I think he's still fully man. I don't know that he had a clear vision of each one of us on the cross, but he did have a heart for each one of us on the way. He does talk about that, and he's praying that this movement that he's already predicted is going to go on and on and on. When these 12 disciples are in the ground, when they're all dead, and another group has taken their place, and the church is still growing, I want to pray for them, he says. And he says, I pray, and here's the prayer, I pray that they're all one, Father, just as you're in me and I'm in you. And so he's praying for a unity here, that we'll be so tied together relationally, so connected that you won't be able to necessarily, if you see any of us, you'll know that we're Christian because of how we act, because of the things that we do. Now, some guys think that this one part is strictly about doctrine, and I'm not sure that I think that is. Doctrine's really important, but I think that we can disagree on a few things as Christians and still be well within the umbrella of Christ's lordship. And in fact, even in this room, I'm confident that we disagree, some of us do, that I may have certain opinions about things as I read Scripture, and you read the same verses and you come to a slightly different opinion, and I think that's okay. The Bible's a great big complicated book, and it's okay if you don't totally have every last part of it figured out 100%. The big oneness here is that we're going to follow Jesus, and we want to be tied to him, and we want to be tied to God. If I can be real graphic about that, I've said this before, I think it's unlikely that any of us are going to get to heaven and God is going to say to that person, I agreed with you on everything. I mean, none of us are going to get to heaven and God's going to say, finally, you're here, someone I can talk to. We agreed on everything. I mean, you know in your heart of hearts that he's going to let some people come into heaven who saw it different than he did. Your ability to get all the right answers on the exam is not really what sets you apart for heaven. It's whether you're wanting to be tied to him and tied to God. And doctrine's part of that. I mean, a big part of it, but it's not the whole thing. It's a unity of relationship. It's a unity of purpose. We're all headed the same direction. It's a movement, and I want to be in the movement. I don't want to constantly be fighting the current of it. I want to be swept along as God takes me that direction, with the understanding that the longer I stay in this current, I'll start to change. I'll know that I need to. I mean, as a Christian, we shouldn't ever say things like, well, I'm just like that, or that's just how I am, because once you step into this river, then we're headed someplace. And I know what it says about old dogs and new tricks, but even if you are an old dog, right? And I'm not looking at anybody. I'll look high. Even if you are an old dog, you're making a commitment once you step into this thing that we're all going towards Christ. And if I get to live to be 100, I'll be closer at 100 than I was at now, and certainly closer than I was at 90 or 80 or 70. I hope that I continue to move his direction. Let me go on. I've still got more to say about this. And says, I want all this to be done so the world can believe. When they see a group of people, Jesus says, when he's praying about this, God, when they see a group of people who are all choosing to go the same direction, they're all choosing to move the same way, they'll believe. It'll be that thing, God, that makes them see it. He says, and I've given them the glory, he says, that you gave me. And I'm going to talk more about glory here in a second. Glory is a really important word here. I've given them the glory, he says, that you gave me, so they can be one as we're one, I and them and you and me, and they'll be brought to complete unity. I've given them glory. I want to say a little bit about that, and then I want to say a little bit more about it. Glory in English today normally refers to honor. If you do something glorious, it means you do something honorable. Right? I mean, you do something that's worth applauding. You do something that's worth praising. And it has that meaning there too. It does. But it's a bigger word than that in the Bible. When you say glory, in particular, the glory you gave me or the glory of God, when you use glory in that kind of framework, it normally has to do with God's character. Like when I'm reflecting God's glory, then I'm reflecting His character. I look like God. I sound like God. I'm acting like God. And so He says, I've given them that glory, and they have it. And as they go on to be one, complete unity, He says the world is going to know. That's what's going to tip them all off. They're going to see all that, and that's going to do it. It won't be the great preaching, which is kind of hurtful to me as a preacher, but it won't be the great preaching all by itself that gets done. It won't be the powerful worship. It won't be the big buildings. You know, the things that people talk about when they're looking for a church. It won't be the big kids program. None of those things are bad, and they're all important. They all help shape us to be who we're supposed to be. But the thing that's going to make the church grow, the thing that's going to take the church someplace, the gates of hell won't ever stop it, is going to be this unity that we're all striving, each one of us, to be where He is, to reflect His glory. Now, when Jesus, this is a whole different chapter, John chapter 12. I was in John 17 before. Whole different chapter. Jesus, when He uses that word glory, sometimes He uses it for the miracles He does, that the miracles reflect God's glory, and in that it reflects His power. But in John 12, and He does this 2 or 3 times too, when the Son of Man is going to be glorified, He says, He talks about dying. I mean, the way that Jesus says, I'm going to be glorified is I'm going to take my one life and I'm going to give it away like a kernel of wheat put in the ground. And that when that happens, it's going to produce. And by sacrificing my own agendas, sacrificing my own thing, God's going to take that and He's going to shine through it. And the glory of God for Christ, in part, was I'm willing to lose, if I have to advance the movement. A lot of you saw the funeral a week ago for Charlie Kirk that was on the news and certainly can be found online. Right before the end of the sermon, Charlie Kirk, who was killed, shot dead, his wife gets up and says that she forgives the guy who killed him. And I don't think she means that just let him go out of jail. I don't think that's what she meant when she said she forgave him. She's just not going to let that have control over her life. She's not going to dwell on revenge. She's not going to meditate how this guy could suffer. She's not going to carry that burden. And then right after she spoke, the president spoke, because in our country the president always speaks last. And he said he's not forgiving the guy. He can't forgive any of his enemies. He wants to get them. And the crowd applauded. And the reason why the crowd applauds, you'd have applauded too if you're there, is that what Trump said makes a lot of sense. Somebody smacks me, I'm going to smack him back. But strictly speaking, that's not really the way of Christ. The way of Christ is that you make this decision to lay your own life down. And you trust that God will take your life and your sacrifice as you're holding on to Him, and He'll do something with it. I give up my control, God. I'm just going to love people like you say to love people, and I'll see what you do with it. And sometimes you don't go see it. Sometimes it looks like the bad guys win. But I think that's what we're called to. And the glory of God is trust in that. God, who has all the power of heaven, could smite anyone He wants to smite. He doesn't usually. He keeps giving us chances. And I make Him known when I hold on to Him, and I lose my control, my ability to fight through there's a power in that. There's a trust in that. Jesus, back to John 17, the thing I was reading, the very first verse of all John 17, He asked God to glorify Him. And when He's asking for that, He's saying, God, I'm getting ready to lay it all down, and I just pray that You use that. And on one side, it's this 30-year-old man dying on a hill, and he leaves behind no kids, and he leaves behind no wife, and you think, well, his movement will die with him. Everybody expected that to happen. But Jesus didn't. He said, you take my life like a wheat seed and you put it in the ground, and I'm going to produce. and the gates of hell won't stop it. And he asks God to glorify him, and God does, and we're still talking about that. When I was in high school, Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about glory days. And for him, glory days was when that boy could toss that speedball past you and make you look like a fool boy. Had a whole lyric in there about that. And he's at the bar hanging out with people, and they're thinking about how awesome it was in high school. That was the whole song. When they really were strong, when they really could do stuff, that was the best. That were our glory days. That's me at my very best, is the premise of the song. Jesus challenges that paradigm. For Jesus, glory is whenever you're most like God. You're created in his image, and when you really reflect him the most, that's glory. It's a little thick, huh? It's a little deep. I knew it was before I got there, but hang with me. I'm almost done. Jesus prays for glory in our unity and our shared nature. I want God, this group that I'm leaving behind, I'm praying for them, he says, that they reflect you as they go forward. That they're unified in this thing. That they're going to be a people, God, who will forgive and love and show grace. They're going to be a people, God, who won't react like everyone else reacts in this world. They're going to show people that there's hope. And it's not just unity. I mean, a criminal gang is unified, right? The mafia has a lot of unity. It's not just being tied together. It's tied together with this shared purpose. Jesus says, another place in John chapter 5, he's talking to the Pharisees. He says, you study scriptures diligently, and you think in them is eternal life, but they're the scriptures that testify about me. And you're not getting there. I mean, it's possible to read the Bible and just reinforce your own pride. And you feel smarter at the end of it. I know more than you, or judgmental at the end of it. Some of the worst abuses by Christians through the years, when Christians could wield Bible like a sword. It's not about knowledge. It's not even about agreeing on the same things. It's about living it. I'm going to choose to live it. It's our calling card. Right? I mean, it's going to be the one thing that's going to tie us together. I'm not on social media super often. I have at phases been on it a lot, but I'm not so much on it very often right now. But the one thing I notice when I go on, and it's because of what I do for a living, that I notice when I go on social media is there's people now on like Christian Facebook or Christian Instagram, Christian Twitter, who will give this advice. If your preacher doesn't mention this on Sunday, find another church. It's a kind of a common thing to do. Like if your preacher doesn't mention the Charlie Kirk shooting at church, you find another church. If they don't mention Gaza at church, find another. They don't mention the Cracker Barrel thing, you find another church. And who cares about Cracker Barrel? And on a lot of that kind of stuff, it almost makes me mad when I read it. Like, well, I'm not going to say anything because you said I had to say something. I'm going to on purpose go the other direction because you're daring me to do it. And I've never really liked that kind of language for a bunch of reasons. First of all, you don't know what that church has went through that week. You don't know what the preachers went through that week. It's kind of a challenge to think of what you're going to say about different things. Doesn't have to be a coward just because he doesn't address the thing that you want him to address. But the second thing that I don't like about it is it makes this assumption that the only thing that's important is that the right words be shouted out at you guys on a Sunday morning. That's the only thing that counts. It really elevates what I'm doing to an uncomfortable level for me. I hope that some level I can be a cheerleader to point you in the right direction. I hope I have that. But it's the right direction that saves you. And it's not about your position on Jimmy Kimmel or the Cracker Barrel controversy or whatever else. You can disagree on most of that stuff with me and still be fine with Christ as long as you're striving to run his direction. Because it's our love that's going to make everybody think that we're different. Jesus in this passage, and I'm skipping a bunch of verses here, but this is where it comes from. In John 17, in that prayer, He says, I'm departing from the world, but they're in the world. He says, but they don't belong to the world any more than I do. And that's this idea is where the phrase, in the world but not of the world, not of this world, that comes from John 17. There's a whole line of clothing for not of this world. If you ever seen this logo, that's what it's about. And if you're wearing that, you're telling people, I'm not of this world. And it's not the clothing that separates you from the world, right? It's not that you have the sign on your shirt that means that you're not of this world. It means that your emotion, how you react to things are just different. People expect you to act like everybody else acts. And it was that thing that Jesus was most concerned about. He calls his disciples together. You know how the bosses in the Gentile world, the outside, the unreligious world, the bosses lord it over each other. High officials exercise authority. Not you guys. It demands a lot of trust. Because wielding authority is fun. Whether you're wielding authority at work or whether you're just telling your neighbor what you're going to put up with. Even bossing your kids around. The reason why so many parents can struggle with that is it feels fun to be angry. It feels fun to be in charge. But we're not called for that. That's not what Jesus had in mind for us. When you follow after him, you're supposed to reflect love and joy and peace and patience, kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. You're supposed to reflect him. This weird thing happens when people start doing that. I've seen this happen several times through the years. You see somebody make a decision to really give their heart to this thing. And there's always a reason not to, right? There's always a reason to not do it. Like if I tell you, you need to forgive that person, there's always a reason not to do that. Well, they'll just do it again. Or I'm not going to give them the satisfaction. Or they don't deserve it. Or if I tell a husband, you need to be gentler with your wife. Well, you don't know how she talks to me when we're not, or you don't know how she treats, or vice versa. You need to be kinder to your husband. You don't deserve it. You need to know what's, or at work, you need to really reflect who Christ is. Well, you have no idea who I work with. You have no idea what kind of people I'm around. And I'll talk to people, and I'll teach, right? Not so much about Cracker Barrel or Jimmy Kimmel, but we'll teach on this point. And somebody will get it, and they'll say, okay, I'm going to try. Maybe they pray about it real hard. Maybe every day they wake up and they pray about it. God, I just want to reflect you. I want to be different like you. I want to shine in this world like you. And so you start making the decision that you're going to change even if no one else does. And it hurts a lot. But as you get into it, you start seeing the wisdom of it. It starts making sense to you. And so you start pursuing this thing. And as you're pursuing this thing, you find yourself hungry to be with other people who are doing it too. It's like a bunch of coals in a fire. You take one coal out and it burns out. But when I'm in that fire together, we're all pushing one another. And so you start seeking those people out. The people who seem like they're a little further along in this than you are. And you want to know what it is that they have that you don't have. And so as you get hungrier for it, you find that it's an appetite that can't totally be satisfied in this life. I go to him to drink water. I go to him for food. And it satisfies, but it just leaves me wanting even more of it. I want to be more and more like him. And the deeper I get into it, the more it makes sense to me. I start seeing the whole world that way. And I can suddenly see why people do the things they do. It makes sense to me why people act the way they act. It's not necessarily because they're bad. They're blind. And so I have this heart to want to let them see this thing that I figured out. And I lean into other people, and we're talking about it. And as we bounce off of one another, like atoms, this reaction starts to happen. We're pushing one another to go further and further out. There's such a power in it. And that's what the church is. It's this glorious movement of transformed lives. And you can be the answer to Jesus' prayer. We pray sometimes for things. We wonder why God doesn't come through. Jesus' prayer at the end, you have some control over. Jesus' prayer, you have some power about whether you'll answer his prayer. The tables have turned. He's praying out, but you have a lot of control over whether his prayer will be answered or not. And just for remembrance sake, I've given them the glory you gave me so they can be one like we're one. I'm in them and you're in me, and they'll be brought to complete unity. It's just selling out to the cause. And the cause, of course, is not this building. It's not this property. And it's not even this staff. It's not about you following me. It's about making this decision that you're going to put Christ first in everything. My hunger for you, my hope for you here is that you make that commitment. That you choose today to commit, again, to focus on his family, the church, and God help me be part of it. That you focus again, commit to be the person you're supposed to be when you're away from here. That you commit to reflect his attitudes in your house, that you commit to reflect his attitude in your marriage, even if the other one's, especially if the other one's not doing it. You make the commitment. You're not going to let anybody else determine what kind of human being you're going to be. You're just going to focus on Christ. And as you do that, and as we move together in that, I think he's going to take us someplace. And that's my prayer for you today, too. Let me pray for you. Dear God, I just thank you for this group. I ask you, God, to put your hand on them. And Father, if there's anybody here who needs to commit, I just pray, God, you give them the courage to do it. I pray, Father, for the person who's on the fence, that you again show them how attractive it is, your plan. I pray for the husband and wife who are kind of on last legs, that you breathe new life into them and show them this plan you have. I pray for the parent who's so discouraged. I pray, God, for the co-worker who wonders how they can ever make any sort of a difference in their work. God, just take all of us. We're broken sinners, and I pray, God, that you bring us closer to you. And I pray, God, that you help me to understand better how I can follow. In Jesus' name.